Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet.
Welcome to the Final Furlong podcast. I'm Emmet Kennedy. It is great to have your company and great to be joined by one of the best minds in the game. When it comes to jumps racing, nobody is better informed about the French scene than Adam Mills, and he's back on the Final Furlong. Welcome back, Adam.
Thank you, Emmett. Good to be back. Nice break over the summer, so ready to go.
Let's rattle through a few horses we're going to see over the next few days. Kilgame, Henry de Bromhead and Brian Atchison have teamed up for success at the Cheltenham Festival with Bob Bollinger and Slate Steele. Do they have another potential superstar in Kilgame who comes from the same source that produced Tiapu?
Yeah, I think we do. I think he's one of the novices I'm most excited about. He's had one run in France. The form of that race has worked out exceptionally well. Kilgame was on his debut that day at Auteuil in March, settled out the back. The race was won by King Conti, who is the most confirmed front runner in history. He basically gets a 10-length lead and wins, or he sulks. And there's nothing in between. But he's won several times since. Kilgame sived through the field. He was the fastest horse on the entire card from the third last to the line. He was just too far back behind the winner. Finished second, which allowed them to keep a novice status. He looks really talented. To give you an idea of the strength of that form, Cola Chico was fourth that day, subsequently won a grade 1 at Auteuil in May, won a grade 2 last weekend. I think Kilgame, in my head, I was thinking maiden hurdle, Lawlers of Naas, which I know Henry de Bromhead did unfortunately with Grand Jury, was sadly lost a couple of years ago, but there is that kind of approach. And I think the only downside for Kilgame is that he's running at Cork on Friday against one of Willie's called Quelle Histoire, who I also think could potentially be a top-class 2-mile novice. So that looks a cracking race, but certainly the one thing I think we know about Kilgame is that he's in the Henry de Bromhead yard. So if he wins this maiden hurdle, they're generally not afraid to roll the dice and see what they've got. And I think if he runs well at Cork, or if he wins at Cork, then I'd imagine he'll be going to the Lawlers of Naas.
So straight into Grade 1 company, you're expecting if he goes and runs well?
Yeah, but why not? Let's find out. And but equally he might run really well on Friday and still get beat by Quelle Histoire.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible. But what I liked about him was in a race where the front runner stole a 10-length lead and controlled the pace, Kilgame came through a field of winners, and he finished second, having made up the best part of 12 lengths. So that alone would suggest that he's got plenty of talent, because it happens a lot, unfortunately, but in slowly run French races, you don't see too many horses make up ground from the back. And the fact the form behind him has worked out quite well. They paid a big sum. It was a private sale, but it's a big sum. I don't think there's anything yet to suggest this isn't a graded performer. I certainly don't think he's a handicapper. I think he is a graded novice hurdler of some kind.
Okay. One to very much keep an eye on. Worth mentioning, he has an entry for the Future Champions Novice Hurdle, which would be highly unlikely to see him take that up because it would only be a couple of weeks in between. But still, it tells you the regard the horse is held in, that he has that entry already. The next horse to be watching out for, who we might see next week, is Karoline Banbou, daughter of No Risk at All, sire of Allaho, Epatante, Allegoria de Fassi, oh my God, and Blood Destiny, and is a grade 3 winner of a National Hunt bumper in National Hunt flat race in France, because they don't really have bumpers out there. Why is Karoline Banbou making your list?
She makes the list because, contrary to what Racing Post will tell you, she's actually very experienced, had 7 or 8 starts. She's got graded form in AQPS flat bumpers. Now, to understand those, they are bumper races for AQPS breds, but they're age group fixed. So they're 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds. You don't run where you get a 4-year-old against a 6-year-old, things like that. But her form ties in with the best AQPS bumper horse of the last year, which is Camaro de Huez. He's a multiple grade 1 winner. She got pretty close to him in the Prix de Vienne. He's subsequently won another AQPS, and now he's gone hurdling. He's a winner over hurdles, and he won the grade 3 at Compiègne last week against the older horses as a 4-year-old. So the fact that she got within a couple of lengths of him bodes really well. JP Manis has gone in. She's very exciting, really honest filly. I cannot see a scenario where she doesn't run in the Mares Novice Hurdle. I'm not sure whether she wins it or not because I haven't studied that kind of form, but she looks all class from her bumper form, and I would fully expect her to win that maiden hurdle on Monday, in which case she'll be even shorter than the ridiculous 12s that she is now.
She's already 12s.
I think she's already 12. She is. There are lots of Twitter personalities, I would say, including myself, who've mentioned that we think she might be a bit special, and I think it's snowballed to the point where I wouldn't want to take that price, but she looks pretty talented, and everything in her form from those AQPS races would suggest that she could be top class.
Okay, what about Liv Conti, who's with the Skelton team?
Yeah, I put him in because I think it's been sort of slipped under the radar that he's gone to the Skelton team. He won the Prix Pride of Kildare, which is a newcomers race at Auteuil. That race in 2022 threw up both gust of wind for Willie Mullins and Jazzy Matty, the Boodles winner. Liv Conti went through that. The forms worked out quite well. The time was pretty decent. He's joined Dan Skelton. He's a winner. So, again, he's won a race. They may as well press on with him. He's going to run in the John Hales and Alex Ferguson partnership. I think he's quite exciting, and he's another one that you just think, right, look for the entries because he's a British juvenile and he's running in a much shallower pool, so you might be able to get some momentum with him. I think the form of the Prix Pride of Kildare over the next year or so is going to work out really well. The second's been bought by JP McManus, but probably isn't going to be seen until next season. I think they're going to give him some time. But I just really like the way Liv Conti went through the race, and I just think there's another good case to be made that Dan Skelton probably isn't going to be able to get him handicapped as a juvenile, in which case he's probably going to be running in the graded races. So certainly one to look out for this side of the water.
The fact that he's by Cocorico automatically makes me think of stamina. Would I be right on that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you'll find that he's got the kind of profile that runs over 2 miles as a juvenile and then he gradually steps up in trip. They'll probably go chasing with him at some point. The Pride of Kildare is a very good newcomers race, but it's one of the last newcomers races at Auteuil. So you don't tend to rock up there expecting an easy time on debut. And the fact he's won it and the fact the race has worked out in the past bodes pretty well. And if he's joined the Skeltons for those connections, then we also know that there's a fair sum probably been paid for him.
For sure.
And one thing I think everyone is trying to do is to recruit the right horses from France. And if you're going to beat Willie Mullins in that game, you've got to spend big. But there's a lot to like about the form. And the fact he's a winner means we're going to see him. There's nothing to sit on. We may as well get on with it because he's won a race in October. So he's another that I'd expect to see at some point, probably in January. And if he wins on his British debut, then he'll end up in the big graded contest.
Okay, I've no idea what the value of the form is, but the third and the fourth have both won subsequently from that win. So valuable horse. Liv Conti or Live Conti, whichever pronunciation you want to go for, is definitely one to be keeping an eye on for the Skeltons. Faut De Toi for the little known Willie Mullins. This guy could be someone to keep an eye on. Apparently, he does well with juvenile hurdlers. My goodness. And we could talk about 50 juvenile hurdlers probably at the Willie Mullins yard, and that's not an exaggeration. But why has this one made your list?
Well, the first reason he made the list is he's had one run in France, and the form worked out exceptionally well. Finished third. The winner subsequently won a listed hurdle. The second, Sauvignon, subsequently won a listed hurdle, as now Don Paul Nichols. Fou De Toi was a bit green on debut, but he really learned his task. Knuckled down well after the third last, made good progress all the way to line, only beaten about 4 or 5 lengths. One run, still a novice, straight to Willie Mullins. I think they see Fou De Toi as a longer term prospect. So I don't think Fou De Toi is likely to win a 3-year-old hurdle at Tremor on a Monday afternoon unless they really see him as a potential superstar. But he's the kind of type that I think Willie might just throw into that grade 2 at Christmas, or even the spring juvenile, like he did with Madgeburn. Just think, all right, just throw him in. Let's throw him in and see. But he has a lot of ability. The form from back in May worked out pretty well. He's joined Willie Mullins, which is the best possible place for any juvenile to go. I just think at this kind of stage, there's so many Willie Yard that you don't know. Fou De Toi could easily be Salvatore Mundi. They might decide, you know what, we think we've got a talented horse here, so we'll roll the dice in graded company, but if we don't win that, we'll just wait and we'll have a novice for next season. But he's really exciting, and the fact that the two horses in front of him, both won listed hurdles subsequently, would suggest that he's probably run close to 125 on debut. Well, if he does that with further improvement, that's got to be enough to see him as a competitive juvenile if he takes his chance.
Willie had a grade 2, used to be a grade 1, that Ferry House Novice Hurdle, but a grade 2 Novice Hurdle winner with a son of Motivator, and this one's by Motivator as well. So Faut De Toi, one to watch out for. One that I was very impressed with only a couple of weeks ago for the Venetia Williams yard is Morning Air. Charlie Deutsch was looking around for dangers and there were none. She was very, very impressive. What are you expecting to see from her next?
Well, I put her in because I just thought you don't often see Venetia pressing on with juvenile hurdles too much.
Yeah.
I'll admit and say I laid Morning Air thinking she's quite a lightly trained filly. She won't like this ground. Jesus, that bit me in the arse. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, no.
Turning for home, I thought, maybe she'll empty. And then it became apparent Charlie Deutsch wasn't going to move and we're still going to win, but these things happen. Can't get them all right. Closing sectionals were 17.21 and 15.46 seconds, which were the fastest on the day. Now, the form's nothing special. The second is a horse called Roy de Bavière, who's with Fergal O'Brien. Roy de Bavière is probably a 110 kind of horse, so it's nothing exceptional, but you can't knock Morning Air. She bolted up. She's got nice experience from the flat. She's now won a race. There's a few options for fillies. I don't think this is a Triumph Hurdle horse, and I don't particularly think it's something that's going to end up in the Boodles or anything like that, but there's quite a good programme for 4-year-old fillies, and Venetia Williams looks to have one who's a bit more forward than most of her French recruits. And the fact that she's got experience from the flat would kind of suggest to me she's probably a hurdler rather than a chasing prospect. But it was just something that, firstly, I was annoyed that I laid her, but, she got to a rating of 86 on the flat in France, so she certainly wasn't useless. And that was probably a career best to win that juvenile hurdle. And again, 3-year-old stroke 4-year-old fillies hurdles in the UK aren't going to be that deep. So she could pick up a couple of nice pots, and I'd imagine they'll have some black type in mind for her at some point.
Definitely one to keep an eye on. Karniquet, it won the same race that Willie Mullins won with Laurina and Gallic Warrior. My really only question for you about this horse is, how far does he win the Martin Pipe by?
The Martin Pipe? I'm not going to waste a horse this good in the Martin Pipe. Come on.
There's also a problem. He would need to have another 2 starts to qualify for it.
Yeah, so he's had...
Thanks to Bunch Jockey Club.
He's had a couple of starts in France, which worked out okay for Isabelle Paquet. It wasn't like amazing form. He sort of got form with horses who would now be rated 118 to 120. So there's nothing exceptional. But I really like this debut at Tremor. Now, we have to clarify that the son was in an awkward position at Tremor.
It was a
bumper. In this maiden hurdle, I think they jumped 3 hurdles. So, we don't really know a great deal about it. But what I decided to do is I thought, you know what, sod it. I'm just going to compare the time of this race to the time of the bumper. Because the bumper was won by a 2 to 5 shot of Willie's called Sertudo. Well, Karniquet's time is really good. The average speed is really good. The final circuit is 6 seconds quicker than the bumper. Now, the bumper was a bit of a joke, and it didn't look the deepest race. And the 2 to 5 favourite, despite looking keen, won easily. But that time bared out really well. Karniquet found really nicely coming out the dip. The one thing I'd say about Karniquet is the ground was soft to heavy at Tremor. Karniquet also ran at Faut, where the ground is always knee-deep. So we would need to sort of see that there's a good ground ability there too, but I can't knock it, and I think the time would suggest that there's a bit of speed there too. Quite a nice horse, just not... Sometimes people will look and think, right, I've got to concentrate on Fairy House and Leopardstown and Punchestown. Well, actually, maybe Karniquet did something at Tremor that was better than we've seen in some of these other novice races. So who knows? I mean, now they've won a race, I'd assume they'll go the usual route of kind of we'll throw it into a graded novice and see what we get. But maybe it's a Martin Pipe horse, I'm not sure. No real idea. I'd imagine Gigginstown don't really care which race they win as long as they win one. But you'd think probably the route here is to go either to finish as an also ran in a graded novice, in which case you might sneak into the Martin Pipe, or if not, why not have a go? I think it's probably the intermediate trip would suit a bit better. I don't think Supreme will be ideal, but we'll see. But the horse has got to prove that it can do it on quick ground.
I understand why they made the change to the handicap rules, because you could look at the Martin Pipe and see Better Days Ahead, Waterford Whispers, Key to Bourbon, and KF Tara as horses that, like, they could have enhanced some of the other staying hurdles that they've been there. But they all would have been murdered by Ballyburn, and they probably wouldn't have taken them on anyway. And I don't think they really thought about the long-term consequences of that decision. Those handicap hurdles, it's very rare you're going to get an unexposed young horse who's got plenty of improvement up their sleeve. There's one from Dan Skelton I can think of, and it might not be the one everyone else is thinking about, that might be ideal for the county hurdle. But you've made it very, very difficult now. And this kind of horse obviously can't end up in that race. So it's going to have to be the graded, unless he goes spectacularly wrong between here and there, in which case he shouldn't be on your mind for the Martin Pipe in the first place. But overall, do you see him as a Bearing Bingham 2.5 mile type, or as an out and out 2 miler for now?
I think they'll keep him to 2 miles, but I expect him to step up in trip at some point. The way I think will happen is all the time, if they keep coming across soft or heavy ground, he'll run over 2 miles. And that's fine. What I expect probably will happen is he'll end up at Leopardstown at some point where the ground is generally better. And on good to soft ground, he'll be outpaced over 2 miles, and then they'll go up in trip. But there are hundreds of horses in the Mullins yard that you could make cases for that will run in graded races and then drop back to handicaps. Personally, I think the Mullins horse that ran in the Cesarovic, Sea of Sand, I think it's called.
Yes.
That looks like that's a handicap plot to me. Let's run in graded races. We won't quite be good enough, and we'll roll into a county hurdle or whatever off a mark in the low 140s. So, but that's generally the kind of MO that I'd look for from that yard is we'll run in graded races, and then if we're not quite good enough, we'll end up in handicaps. And that is what happens to Gallop into Champ, and there's hundreds of examples of this kind of route. Do I agree with the handicap rule changes? No. Do I think the Turner should be a handicap? No. Idiotic decision. You can't run 2 handicaps over the same course and distance on the same bloody day. Because what's going to happen is we'll have a novice handicap that won't fill, and we'll have the plate, which also won't fill because they're on the same day. What they should have done is kept the Turners as a grade 1 and made the Brown Advisory 3 mile boat race a handicap. Because then that way the good horses don't have to go up to 3 miles just yet. And the ones that are too slow to win over the shorter trips can contest off a handicap. That's my rant out the way.
Well, I'd have just gotten rid of the National Chase.
Yeah.
Or I'd have merged it with the Kim Muir. Something along those lines.
But JP can't land a plot over 3 mile 6, Emmet.
Won't somebody think of JP's plot jobs? Oh my goodness. Yeah. How selfish of me. What was I thinking?
He won't be able to pay the water and electric bill in April if he doesn't land that plot. Be fair. I
was just looking at Sea of Sands with a view to Willie pulling off a handicap plot. He's going to have to be really clever because they'll need to run him in something like the Future. Is he even in it? He's it. Yeah. So they're going to do the absurd route. He's going to run in the Future Champions Novice Hurdle. That'll only be his 3rd start over hurdles. Then they'll have to fit him into something either between the DRF. No, it would need to be between then and the DRF and then the DRF. And then you're qualified for the county hurdle, and then we can unload on him. But you're not going to see that horse real. I thought he was very eye-catching at Fairyhouse the other day, but I don't think you'll see him perform to his absolute optimum until he applies for the application of cash in the county hurdle, shall we say. This horse, though, that we're talking about, Karniquet, he's by the same sire as Aplutard, Clan de Sobo, and Fakir Dudery, Capguard, and he's a half-brother to Gemarand, who's a pretty decent handicap chaser for Venetia Williams. I'm excited by him, very excited by him, but talk of the Martin Pipe, it has to be killed straight away. Nietzsche has. So I thought you'd made a mistake because once I clicked on this horse, immediately his stallion profile came up. But no, he does have a stallion profile. He is going to stud, but not before a trip to Chepstow.
Yeah, well, this came really out of left field, really. Nietzsche was the best 3-year-old in the spring, ended the spring as the highest rated 3-year-old, and I thought, this will be all right. It'll be the same as Jig made 12 months ago. It'll rock up at Auteuil in the autumn, beat everything, and then he'll go off to stud as a grade 1 winner, having won the Campus Series. Didn't really work out for them in that he came back, got beat in September, Didn't really improve in October, but in his last run, which was in the Grade 1 for 3-year-olds in November at Auteuil, he came second to Saint Esprit and Deep Ground, returned pretty much to the form that he showed in the spring. And he was bought as a 2-year-old with a view that we'll run him as a juvenile hurdler and then we'll have a successful son of Zarak to go to stud as a national hunt sire. That's all planned. They booked him into stud. Everything's ready. And then Roland, the trainer, goes, well, there's the Grade 2 juvenile at Chepstow. I think we might have a go at that before we go to stud. And it's like, oh, okay. I'd have made him a million to have ever looked at that race as an option. But that's at the moment what the plan is, that he'll run in that race at Chepstow. If he does, he's probably capable of running to a mark of 135 to 140. That might be enough to win that Grade 2. I can't really understand why they're doing it unless they think he's going to win it, because then we'll enhance his stud record and his profile. It seems an odd one, but it's something certain to look out for. If he turns up at Chepstow in the same form that he showed at Auteuil, it's going to be very hard to beat. But it's just really odd that he's got more exciting times ahead, shall we say. So all of a sudden he's coming to Chepstow, which is the first runner the trainers had at Chepstow from what I can find. Seemed a bit unusual, but it's certainly something to look forward to over Christmas. And this is his last run. He's booked in at stud. He's already got bookings. A very odd one, certainly not one I would have predicted, but he's quite exciting. And what it will at least do is it should give us a rough guide as to how strong the French juvenile form is.
Ooh, good point. Okay, so he's in your tracker for one run and one run only. That's the finale at Chepstow. Naihas. And then the final race, or final horse even, is a horse who we're going to see, hopefully, in the King George, and that is the one French raider. Talk to me about Puntos Ganamos.
Close enough. Well, he might be the only French raider. It depends if you really...
Give us the proper pronunciation first.
It's Puntos Ganamos.
Damn it, why didn't I just go with Ganamos? Why did I have to complicate it? Oh, what a fool.
He's with David Cotin. He's a Grade 1 winning chase as a 4-year-old. He's got some really smart French form in the very best staying chases in France. He's also got a habit of falling, which is not necessarily ideal.
Yeah, I did notice that.
When he completes, he's a genuine Grade 1 type. I think he could run to a mark somewhere between 155 and 160. Now, that in most years would not be enough to win a King George, but if we assume I'll have to win,
it's not most years.
If you take out the Irish horses, this is a handicap. So there's fair play to David Cotin and Connections. They've said they plan to supplement and run in the race. He's a very strong traveller. He's got plenty of speed. Will he win the King George? No. And the firms that have priced him up had him around 14s to 16s when they first put him in.
What?
That's not a good price. So I don't know. What would you want? I'd probably wouldn't even back in the win. I'd bet place only, sort of 5s or bigger. Hopefully he'll get a quiet ride to come through late. He's got some very smart form, and he is the horse who decided to hassle Est Francai for the lead in the Prix-La Haye Josselin. Now, when he did that, Est Francai threw his toys out the pram because he was being hassled for the lead. I think Puntos Ganamos is more likely to finish in front of Est Francai if they both ran, but I don't think either of them will win the King George. But it's just an interesting runner. He should be competitive with the British pace horses, and that in a bad year might be enough to hit the frame.
Okay, so a couple of things I want to talk to you about from that. The first is, if we were to go on official ratings, and it depends on who you talk to about official ratings, but it's not a handicap. But if you just go on those, Ahoy Senor is the highest rated on 169. He'd need to start now. Protectorat's not going to run. They've ruled that out already. He doesn't really go right-handed. Brave Man's Game was broken by Galopin de Champs. You can say whatever you want about the Gold Cup. Oh, the Gold Cup doesn't take it out of horses. Okay. You keep backing horses who get beaten in the Gold Cup and tell me how they get on for you. No, do it. Keep defending that and keep betting on those horses and keep tipping them and tell me how it works out for you long term. Okay, so he's done. Royal Pagaille in an open year, maybe. Grey Dawning, I thought I thought he left this behind him the last day, but he's a very, very talented horse. You're then into the French horse for the highest rated. So maybe that's 16s. Maybe I was a bit harsh to be bashing them for that. They actually might be. Do I want to defend odds compilers? What am I doing? What am I doing? So from a ratings perspective, he doesn't need to improve that much to at least place. And I think you've made that case very, very well. On Est Francai, though, and we didn't talk about this beforehand, there's very mixed messages coming out about him. But one of the quotes that Racing TV were running with was his connections, or at least one of his connections, was very concerned about his ability to ever run at grade 1 level again. Because they were saying, whatever physical issue he has, it's not going to stop him being a racehorse, but it might impede him at grade 1 level.
I don't know. I'm not a vet. Nothing has specifically come to light. What I would say is I got a couple of messages after Est Francai got beat. One of them was from Ross Millar, who obviously does some stuff on the Furlong. Brilliant judge. And Ross said, bit moody. And when he said that, I thought, oh, maybe it is. So I went back and I watched all his French form, but I watched his French form when he got beat. And he's been beaten 3 times in France in quite high-profile cases. Now, the first time was over hurdles. The first time he stepped into all-age company, Hermes Bantalem kicked him aside. And I thought, okay, fair enough. That was a tough race. They put him away. He came back over fences, did his thing, went to Kempton. He produced a performance that I just was unbelievable. But then you start to look at Est Francai's form, and you look and think, right, when he's won, what's he beaten? At Kempton, he beat the ill-fated Hermes Alain and Kilgame King. If either of those were running in the King George this year, they'd be any price you want. In France, over fences, he's yet to beat a horse rated higher than 145 if they were to run in the UK. So you start to think, actually, show me the case that needs to be made. And I fell into the trap of thinking Est Francai will bounce out in front of the King George and he'll beat everything. And then he had a blip last year in March when James Reevely decided to try and ride him differently, and he just didn't perform at all, and he got turned over at like 1-5. Then he gets beat on his comeback, and then they get a win into him, and you think, okay, maybe they've solved it. But actually, when he wins and he looks glorious, it's because he steals 5 lengths at the start, nothing gets near him, and he's just in a rhythm. And he's a really smooth jumper, and he's got a lovely cruising speed. But in the Prix-Le Hay Josselin, everything was going fine at the start. And then Hunos Ganamos was moved closer to him. And you could almost see, if you watch the replay, once Hunos Ganamos is within 2 lengths, Est Francai's jumping goes to pot. He loses his rhythm, and then he gets to the water jump, which is a massive jump. It's a big jump in front of the stands at Auteuil. He gets to the water, he meets it completely on the wrong stride, he loses all momentum. 2 fences later, he's pulled up. And I just think, if I was a jockey and Est Francai was lining up at Kempton, I think I'll just go and hassle him. I'll just sit on his quarters. He doesn't like it. He just doesn't like it. And, clearly there might be a physical issue, and I know he's bled and it's all a bit messy, but I just think maybe he has to have it his own way, and if he doesn't, it doesn't go to plan. And what would really concern me, the Prix-Le Hay Josselin is over an extended 3-mile fight. It's a real grueler, and grandiose. He's a brilliant horse, stays forever, won it really well. He's done the double this year with the Grand Steeplechase. But that race was probably a 0-160 at best. And if Spallan's Tower or Corbett's Cross or whatever run to their form, Est Francai would have to run deeper than that. And I just think the minute he got eyeballed, I'd be laying in for all I was worth. So, I mean, maybe it's that's. I'm not saying he's not a great horse, because he is. But if you didn't watch the video and you just looked at the form book, you'd have to question whether he's King George material, because there's nothing in his form book, particularly over fences, that would suggest he's going to kick the Irish out of the way. Now, Noel George is a really promising trainer, and he and Amanda Zeton were doing brilliant things in France. But Noel is also exceptionally bullish, shall we say. And on every podcast, he goes, yes, this is my horse. General on Chef is thrown in. And to be fair, Noel was nearly right. He nearly won the Hennessy. Sorry, the Gold Trophy, whatever it's called.
No, it's the Hennessy.
It's quite hard to equate the French form, but I would always be of the view the King George is a stronger race than anything run over Fancies or Auteuil. And so if he didn't win and wasn't able to cope with Hunos, Ganamos and a few others in the Prix de Haye Jocelyn, what would be different at Kempton? Yeah. Now, if James Reevely gets on board and he steals 5 lengths at the start, it's a different kettle of fish altogether because he's got a high cruising speed and he's very hard to peg back. And there might be some of these chasers who are taken completely out of their ground, which can happen at Kempton. But I'd also be thinking, if you start backing horses that blow out consistently, you generally don't make much money.
Yeah, bookmakers won't apply any affordability checks to a customer that wants to keep backing a horse that keeps getting pulled up. Like, they're more than happy to take your business. If you're capable of beating the SP, or if you're named Adam Mills, they don't want your business at all. I can see why you're so interested in puntos ganamos. Lo siento, no hablo mucho español. Because the more you look at the King George, the more it's just a complete head scratcher. And we had Shark Hanlon on the show around about this time last year, actually. And one of the reasons we had him on was because you could see him running a massive race. But at the time, he was 50s when we had him on the show. Not long after that show went live, he wasn't a 50-1 shot anymore. And the closer you got to the race last year, the more I found it perplexing. I'm the very same this year. If Spillane Tower comes into the race, he should improve, and that will make him very interesting. But apparently Corbett's Cross goes as well, and he'll improve. He'll need to, but he will improve. And I think his Aintree run gives him a massive, massive chance in this race. And I think I'd rather be with something that's coming through as opposed to one of the established chasers. The only established chaser, and I would be very interested, this is the final question for you before I get overall horse to watch out for. The only established horse that would be of any interest to me is a horse who was absolutely lapped in this race 2 years ago, and that's Envoyalin. Because I know he didn't run his race that day, and they seem pretty determined to go back. Not interested.
Well, if nothing was supplemented, then I could make a case for him. Because of the current entry, you think, well, maybe. But I think he's better fresh. I think Down Royal was the Gold Cup. I think that was the aim. The Envoy Allen's another one that on his day he's brilliant, but he's also capable of being a right moody bastard.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just think which Envoy Allen would turn up. But then equally, you look at this King George field and you just think, please let there be some good Irish runners, because if there's not, this is a terrible race. And I personally thought we won't see Grey Dawning before Cheltenham. And I think Dan Skelton was of that mind. And then Grey Dawning probably came out of the race better than he thought. And he looked at the field and thought, bloody hell, I'm not taking my horse out of that, because there's every chance I could win that 90% fit. So I think JP McManus will win the King George, because I just think whatever they put in will win.
Yeah.
And that's the fact Willie Mullins took all of his out. I wonder maybe if Willie now thinks, maybe I should have left something in. But fast or slows out for the season, he would have been my idea of the winner.
He'd have won.
Well, I just think you have to look at this and think, right, realistically, of all the entries at the moment, what do I think could win a King George? If Grey Dawning hadn't gone to Haydock, maybe he could. I think Kempton will suit him. But that race surely left a mark. That looked like it hurt. Royal Pagaille, Haydock was his be-all and end-all, and I don't think the ground will be soft enough to bring him into it. Bradenman's game's gone at the game. We're struggling. We're really struggling, and sometimes you can try and be too cute and try and steal some value, or try and think you're being smart, betting each way against horses on the downgrade, when actually it's just bloody obvious. Just back JP too, because if he puts them two in, one of them will win it. Surely. That form from Spillane's Tower is miles better than anything else in Britain has put up this season. Absolutely miles better. So if Spillane's Tower runs, I expect him to win. And if he doesn't, Corbett's Cross has probably got enough form in the book to win it anyway. But whatever happens, whatever wins this race, don't automatically assume that this is a strong piece of form, because I don't think it is. I think one of the Irish horses could win this by 10 lengths.
I want to be with one of the Irish horses. I want to be with one of the Irish up-and-coming staying chasers. I was just going through this. I think the last time a horse won the King George, having run in the Betfair Chase, was Clandesobo in 2018, and he was beaten in it. It leaves way too hard a mark. And I think you're absolutely right. I think Dan Skelton took a look at the King George and went, that's trash. I'm not skipping that race. And you can... Did Johnny Dineen say this the other day? You can say all you want about how, oh yeah, he's come out of the race well and he's eaten up and whatever. Like that was a gut buster.
Yeah. That
was a gut buster. I wouldn't want to go near Royal Pagaille, and I really wouldn't want to touch Great Owning, because he traveled through the race like the best horse. And I love the horse. I think he's a super talent. I think he's a very interesting player for the Gold Cup. Not for a King George on the back of that. No way. No way. But best of luck to those who are backing him. I need to have a longer think about that race, but one of the two JP horses is the most likely one. You look at the entries for the King George and then look at the entries for the Savills Chase. Yeah, I think we can see where the balance of power currently lies. Of the horses we've talked about and the ones that we're going to see in the near future, which one are you most excited about?
Which one am I most excited about? Probably, I would say Karoline Banbou is the one I think will win the most number of races. But that's because I think she's a very good mare. And therefore, the Mares Novice should be at her mercy, really. I don't think she'd necessarily win a Supreme, but I think she'd be competitive in one on the flat form she's shown. So she should be exciting. The one that gets me out of bed in the morning is Kilgame. But I've been sitting on Kilgame since March thinking this is exciting. And everyone I talk to goes, yeah, it's exciting, is it? No one's gone, no, you're wrong. So I'm quite hoping that Kilgame comes out on Friday and produces a brilliant performance in the maiden hurdle, because then we will be getting excited. But equally, as I said, he might just be unlucky and bump into Quelle Histoire, who's also an exciting horse. So Henry's Kilgame is the one that I thought could be a real superstar from left field.
Okay, Trish, if you were thinking you were going to take a little bit of time off and upload this podcast tomorrow, no. It's got to go out tonight, I'm afraid. Sorry, Trish, you got to get it out tonight. The word has to get out there to the Final Furlong podcast posse. We've got a horse for Friday. It's trained by Henry de Bromhead. It's owned by Brian Atchison. And hopefully he's going to be a Grade 1 superstar. Adam, really enjoyed this, as I always do, catching up with you on the Final Furlong podcast. First one we've done this season. Hopefully it'll be the first of many. Looking forward to catching up with you again very, very soon. Where can Final Furlong podcast listeners get access to your brilliant analysis?
Well, brilliant analysis, ramblings, however you want to see it. You can find me on Twitter at the moment. Well, X is at GGBanker. There's also predelahorse.com. I tend to put as many French profiles and just other notes and things I see on there. So, but if anyone wants to reach out in my DMs, as long as you keep it clean, feel free to ask a question anytime.
GG Banker on X. Right, that is it from us. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Final Furlong podcast. Thank you for watching it. Did I do the thing? No, of course I didn't do the thing. I was supposed to ask you for likes earlier in this episode. So if you're still with us, hit the like button. Why not just hit the like button anyway? Just hit that. All you gotta do is just like. Done. Simple. Won't ask you again. Thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as we enjoyed recording it. We're back with more content on the Final Furlong podcast very, very soon. From Adam Mills and me, Emmet Kennedy. Look after yourself and each other. God bless.
The Final Furlong podcast is proudly brought to you by Jeff Banks Bet. Get up to £500 refunded as real money for new Jeff Banks online accounts after your first month of betting. Use promo code FFP500 at jeffbanks.bet.